I'm honored to be able to be here with this panel in front of you here today with all we're dealing with in Los Angeles and all that's coming our way in the future. We thought, how do we get in front of this to be able to bring professionals from the field in and get a pulse of what are our federal partners doing? How does this look from a standpoint of 2 to 3 to 4 years out, depending on the event we're talking about? Where are we in the planning? What could we be doing better? Where are the gaps, and what are the challenges from the federal perspective, in particular in the LA28 as well? So we're hopeful. I want to introduce Jesse Redd. For those who don't know Jesse, Jesse's the managing director of Safe Communities Institute and the energy and the heart behind everything we do here. So Jesse, thank you for the work putting this together. Thank you. So some of the things, and we'll have time for questions hopefully, but some of the things we're going to talk about are dignitary protection, election security, other active disruption, and capabilities related to response and recovery effort. And as it turns out, we have somebody today who will be very helpful on the response and recovery portion of that we didn't anticipate having. So again, when one door closes, another opens. So let me introduce our panel, and we start with Brian Lewin, who's first up here. Brian is the special agent in charge of the Los Angeles field office for the U.S. Secret Service. Brian is senior executive for the Central District of California. He oversees the Secret Service law enforcement, protective operation, and protective intelligence missions, as well as external engagements in 7 counties: LA, Orange, Riverside, San Bernardino, Ventura, Santa Barbara, and San Luis Obispo. He previously served as special agent in charge for the Honolulu field office and senior executive for the Indo-Pacific, where he led efforts of 4 field offices and the Secret Service's detailees to the Department of Defense U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, Australian Federal Police Joint Policing Cybercrime Coordination Center, and the International Law Enforcement Academy in Bangkok, Thailand. Mr. Lewin's other leadership assignments include special agent in charge of the San Diego field office, resident agent in charge of the Bangkok resident office, and the attaché to the U.S. Embassy in Bangkok, Thailand. Senior advisor at the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command in Camp Smith, Hawaii, resident agent in charge and Guam resident office, and assistant to the special agent in charge of the Protective Intelligence and Assessment Division in Washington, D.C. You must have cost the Secret Service an arm and a leg in business cards.
I pay for them out of my own pocket,
all right.
but travel costs, yes, the government covered.
Mr. Lewin began his career with the Secret Service in 1998 as special agent in charge in San Diego, a special agent in the San Diego field office, and also served in the Presidential Protective Division, Special Operations Division, Los Angeles field office, and the United States Embassy in Bucharest, Romania. Mr. Lewin is a native of Chicago, Illinois, and holds a Bachelor of Science in Kinesiology from the University of Wisconsin at Madison, a Master of Forensic Science from National University, and is a graduate of the Key Executive Leadership Program at American University. Brian, thank you for being with us. Brian teaches for us as well and is a good friend to USCSCI and somebody who brings a wealth of knowledge to the school. Thank you, Brian. Next, we have Voviette Morgan. Voviette is the Senior Vice President of Safety and Security for LA28. She has a diverse work experience. Voviette is currently the Senior Vice President of Safety and Security for the LA28 Olympic and Paralympic Games, a position she started in August 2023. Before this role, she worked at the Federal Bureau of Investigation for over 26 years. Voviette's roles at the FBI included Assistant Director from May 2022 to June 2023, Special Agent in Charge from October 2017 to April 22, and Special Agent from April 97 to September 2017. While at the FBI, she managed a team of over 400 employees of intelligence operation and criminal investigations and established successful relationships with federal, state, and local, as well as private sector agencies. Voviette earned a bachelor's degree from the University of California, Berkeley from 86 to 90, and then pursued a Master of Public Administration degree nowhere else but the University of Southern California. Voviette, thank you for being here. Voviette's been a friend for probably 30 years, somebody who knows all the players in LA, but has a breadth of experience across the country. I don't know how much you'd be able to share about some of your final assignments, but very interesting background. But also somebody who is forward-thinking and forward-looking, and a great fit for LA28. So we're thankful to have you with us here today as well. And very graciously accepting to stand in for our FBI partner who wasn't able to be here, and as it turns out, a real bonus. Johanna Johnson, or Joe Johnson, is the director of the Response Division for the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Federal Emergency Management Agency, Region 9, FEMA Region 9. The office is in Oakland. In this role, she leads the regional efforts to manage disaster emergency communications, plan and deploy incident management assistance teams, or IMATs, to any disaster area as the face of Region 9. Joe's most recently has served in FEMA Region 9's Planning Branch Chief in the Response Division since July of 23. She also previously served as the Acting Director of FEMA Region 9 Pacific Area. She first joined FEMA in February 2009, working for Region 10, and transferred to 9 in February of 2013, where she served as a Senior Site Specialist and Technological Hazards Branch Chief since August through July of 23. During her tenure at FEMA, Johanna supported the Unaccompanied Children Mission in 2014 as the branch chief at the Ventura Naval Base, the Border Mission in 2021 for Arizona, the Pacific area, and worked closely with the staff in Hawaii, Guam, CNMI, and American Samoa during the initial public health emergency in Arizona and Nevada throughout the public health emergency in various capacities. Prior to joining FEMA, Johanna worked for the state of Washington and the United Nations International Atomic Energy Agency. She studied transitional ministry and leadership at the Pacific School of Religion in Berkeley, California, and she has a bachelor's degree in environmental science and health physics from the Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington. Again, response, recovery, this really rounds out this, so we're very thankful to have you step up and adopt this role. Thank you. And then certainly kind of hosting us today, Lauretta Hill, who is the Assistant Vice President and the Chief of Public Safety at the University of Southern California. Lauretta Hill's dedication to the law enforcement profession spans more than 29 years. She's an energetic, ethical, and accomplished executive leader. Lauretta is a team builder and transformational leader who continues to shape the policing culture. In December of 2022, she was selected as the Assistant Vice President and Chief of Public Safety for USC. As the first female chief in the 77-year history of the University of Southern California, DPS, Lauretta leads the organization of over 300 public safety employees. Prior to accepting the position here, Lauretta was appointed as the first police chief for the Dallas College in August of 2016 and second African-American female in the state of Texas. She combined 7 separate police departments into one functional police agency. She restructured the department, developed new policies, and hired new staff to align with district priorities. She's received numerous awards and recognition for her dedication to policing. Her previous experience includes the Miami Beach Police Department, where she served as deputy chief. She organized the entire department to align with the department's vision, mission, and values. In addition, she reemphasized the value of community policing and introduced concepts of police legitimacy. Lauretta spent over 20 years with the Arlington Police Department and retired as Assistant Chief of Police. During her tenure in Arlington, Lauretta was responsible for security operations and command of all special events, which included the Super Bowl in 2011, the NBA All-Star Game the year prior, the Major League Baseball World Series in 2010 and 2011, and the NCAA Final Four men's basketball games in 2014. Lauretta was the first and highest-ranking African-American female in the history of the department. Lauretta has a master's degree from Texas Christian University and a bachelor's degree from the University of Texas at Arlington. She's a graduate of the FBI National Academy and the Police Executive Research Forum Senior Management Institute for Police. So she's going to moderate this today, and I am very thankful to have all of you here and look forward to the conversation today. Thank you.
Talk to a few friends, and actually it's a reunion from our law enforcement observation tour in Paris. Didn't know we would be back together so soon, but I told them, people said, hey, so you got to go to the Paris Olympics. I said, no, I got to work the Paris Olympics. So, and 23 miles later, after 4 days, we worked the Paris Olympics. So I'm thankful to be back with this team. So I will start it off, Voviette, if I can pass this question to you, and then we'll pass it to Joe and then Brian to finish it up. What overarching strategies should be employed to ensure comprehensive security for major international events, such as the 2028 Olympic and Paralympic Games?
You sure I'm starting? Now, well, thank you, Jim, for the kind introduction. And Lauretta, thank you for hosting us, because I think it's an important conversation that we are about to have. And to your point, I think it is going to be very intimate, because there's a lot of just friends in the audience and partners that we all have worked with over the years. And so they told me they're going to ask us all the hard questions when you open it up for Q&A. But I'm happy to start to tackle that question. But I think what's important is to really establish a little bit of a baseline, to level set, so we're all on the same page for what we're about to embark upon, because we all, as well, and I've got to watch my pronouns when I say we, you folks are the law enforcement community. I have retired, but what we're about to embark upon for 2028 is going to be quite a heavy lift, and it is going to be very much business unusual. And I always like to start with that, because what LA28 is asking you folks to do is something that you are not accustomed to doing. We have a wonderful law enforcement community here in Los Angeles, and I was privileged enough to be a part of it for about 20 years of my 26-year FBI experience. But again, to level set, what we're about to embark upon for 2028 is we will host the Los Angeles region here. We will host the largest peacetime event in world history come 2028. And I say that gently because, one, I hope it is peacetime. And if you talk to my counterpart, who I spent a lot of time with in Paris, he did not know that he would be tackling an Israeli-Hamas war, in his planning process. And I promise, Lauretta, I'm going to get to your question, but part of the planning process is to build a plan that is flexible, fluid, and agile, because the bottom line is we don't know what we are going to be dealing with from a threat landscape in 4 years. When you host a worldwide event, I always like to say, you bring in worldwide threats to your backyard. And that is going to be a challenge for us. And again, 4 years, we don't know what it's going to bring. But when I say hosting the largest worldwide event, just by the numbers, we anticipate, one, we're going to have about 15,000 athletes participate in the Olympics. And I'm glad, Lauretta, you said this in your question, it is the Olympics and the Paralympics. We have to be mindful, we're basically hosting 2 large-scale events back to back. The Olympics, starting off mid-July, it will be operational for 17 days. And then we'll take about a 2-week break. And then the Paralympics will be operational for 13 days. So fulsome, it's a 30-day operational period. And we're going to operate at 40 venues, 40 plus venues, games venues, 40 plus games venues that will operate simultaneously. And at each games venue, we're talking about a competition, battle rhythm, of about 2 to 5 sessions per day. So again, from a law enforcement standpoint, we all have been a part of very large-scale events. But when I talk about the Olympics, that is getting people in the venue, into the venue, that is getting them out, that is getting new ticketed people into the venue, getting them out, getting new ticketed people into the venue, and getting them out. And like I said, 40 plus games venues simultaneously, and 2 to 5 sessions per day at each one of those venues. So again, when you talk about the planning process, Lauretta, and the strategies, I'm asking you folks to do something we have not done before, even though we have hosted Super Bowls, and we're going to host another one, as I like to call it, a practice event, before the Olympics. So I'm thrilled the NFL is kind enough to do that for me and the community here. But we will have about 150, 200 heads of state here. And when we talk about dignitary protection and some of those issues where Brian is a subject matter expert on that will be a lift. That will be a heavy lift. And when we talk about having an Olympic village, like I said, with 15,000 athletes, that's going to be at UCLA. But too, as you folks know, as I see LA County Sheriff, I see Orange County, we have a very large span of territory. We will have to have satellite villages. One thing that we can't have is an Olympics without athletes. So I can't have athletes stuck in 2-hour traffic as we navigate through this process. So we'll have to have satellite villages within various aspects of our territory in order to make this happen. But we'll have about 30,000 broadcasters. Again, it's a worldwide event. It's just size, scale, and scope is daunting. We anticipate we will sell about 15 million tickets for this type of event. And again, we just haven't seen the likes of this. And so it's exciting, at least I hope people are excited, it's fascinating. But again, Lauretta, when you talk about the planning process, there's a lot that goes into it, but again, I think comprehensively, we have to build a security plan when it's all said and done that is flexible, that is really intelligence driven, and able to manage whatever threats do come our way. And then we have to be agile. We have to know that the plan has to be flexible because we're going to have to pivot. We will have to pivot along the way. And I will just pass a little bit of the buck to my colleagues on the stage, but also we anticipate that we will probably need 25 to 30,000 law enforcement officers to tackle this problem set. In Paris, like Lauretta said, all four of us were, the three of them were kind enough to join me on this observer tour, and it was really eye-opening. But for opening ceremonies in Paris, they had 45 to 50,000 law enforcement officers for opening ceremonies. And that complement of law enforcement was from over 44 countries. In addition to private security, they had about 22,000 private security. So again, very large in scale and scope. So visible deterrence was a very big part of their security plan. But we'll do things a little differently here. What we saw, I always like to say, is we witnessed how the French put on an Olympics, and now we'll have an opportunity to show how the U.S. puts on an Olympics. And it's not all plug and play, but we do some things differently here. But that's all going to be a part of the planning process, which many of you will be a part of your agencies. And I'm glad we have 4 years right now to embark
In
upon.
3 months, we won't be able to say 4 years.
That's right.
We won't be able to say 3 years, just 3 months from now. So Joe, if you want to jump in on that, and Brian, I'm going to take the second question to you, talking about especially FEMA, just some overarching strategies and how we ensure that comprehensive security.
Yeah, sure. When it comes to on the security side, right, I think what we are really is that support mechanism. I always like to say is that FEMA is really good at consequence management, resource management. We do a lot of coordination, asks historically outside of what maybe our traditional role is on responding to and supporting disasters. But I think that in this case, it's really about making sure is that we're looking at the fringes, making sure that we're bringing those resources that you all need to make sure that you're ready and prepared, right? So it's not just a response and recovery aspect, but there's this national preparedness, and that's where we have like our training and exercises. So we bring those pieces to the table and to the group. And so I think those are some of the key things that we can bring forward in that arena. I think it's truly that partnership, right? Of what can we do in making sure that if there's things on the plate, whatever might be falling off, that we're putting it back on that plate to make sure that we are executing successfully together. So that's kind of one of the, I think on the security side of things, what we bring comprehensively to the plan.
Okay. And to follow up that, which you talked about the collaboration piece. So Brian, I'll pass this to you. What are some key elements of successful government and interagency collaboration in preparing for large-scale events?
Okay. Great. Thank you, Chief. First, thank you to Jim and Jesse and Chief for having me here and joining the panel. Appreciate being here with my colleagues as always. So when we're talking about planning, most importantly, and I think that this is true for a lot of things we do in life, it's communication. We start with the communication. The other piece too is understanding specific roles and responsibilities, because what we're looking at doing when it comes to this type of planning is it's how are we layering the authorities, the resources, and the capabilities across federal, state, and local governments. So not just law enforcement, but broad public safety. So very fortunately, as Voviette had mentioned, that French do it the French way, the U.S. do it the U.S. way. But what we have in place is that we have what we call under the National Special Strategic Events. And these NSSE events, what that is designed to do is recognize events of national and international significance that could have a potential for a terrorist attack or major crime, and bringing all aspects of the government together. So when we're talking about what does collaboration look like, collaboration starts with coming together with a designation, bringing to bear all federal resources, which we do not see with other types of events, which we can explain later, such as the Super Bowl or such as FIFA World Cup. But it brings all those resources, both human resources, as well as other technical capabilities, as well as intelligence, as Voviette pointed out, together. Now, when we're working together, the format that we take is that once we have an event designated as an NSSE, then the first thing we do is establish what we call the Executive Steering Committee. And so the reason why this group is important today is because for every NSSE that is established in the United States, and this is the policy, there's Presidential Policy Directive 22 that drives this. So from a policy standpoint, the key thing is that it is codified in law. We're mandated to do this. This isn't something that we make up on the fly. There is a process in place. We started doing this about 27 years ago. We've had probably 78 NSSEs this country has held. But what this does is the three primary partners for every NSSE, regardless of location across the nation, it is going to be FEMA, it's FBI, and Secret Service. With the Olympics, the key partners right now are going to be Los Angeles Police Department and Los Angeles Sheriff's Department and California Highway Patrol. And those 6 executive steering committee co-chairs basically drive the planning. Then what happens is we create subcommittees, and the subcommittees are then get down to your subject matter expert. So as Voviette mentioned, we have those 4 years. One of the things that is unique about the Olympics and the approach we've taken as a country is that at no other time have we had a 4-year on-ramp to planning. And the key about this is because most national security special events, so if you think about what we recently had, United Nations General Assembly in New York is an annual event, but we had the Democratic National Convention, we had the Republican National Convention, we had the NATO Summit. Those are just 4 we hosted this year. A lot of time those events, or maybe some of you may have been familiar with the APEC in San Francisco about a year ago, that those events sometimes are scheduled out maybe like a year, 18 months, at most 24, 4 years. 4 years. The reason is because of all the points that Voviette mentioned about the complexities, the size and scope of the event, and how we're going to communicate across multiple jurisdiction lines. But what this means is that when we are looking at all these different counties, all these different municipalities, all the resources from the state, and then the resources that the federal government brings, it starts with you need to understand what is the role and responsibility your agency plays in falling into these buckets. And as Jim mentioned, the benefit of having Joe join us today is that the 3 overarching categories that we collaborate in are security planning, incident response and intelligence, and consequence management. And that's why we have the Secret Service, FBI, and FEMA, because as organizationally, we own those different lanes. So everything starts with understanding what is your agency going to bring to bear. And this is like, and the key thing about it is that certain agencies like police departments, sheriff's departments, Cal OES, fill multiple roles. And so when we're looking at these subcommittees in terms of, let's say, for example, consequence management subcommittee that FEMA will see, an intelligence subcommittee that FBI would oversee, venue security that Secret Service would oversee, but transportation, geospatial intelligence, even stuff as simple as how are we coordinating where people are going to stay? As Voviette mentioned, all these people are going to come in. These conversations started today in partnership with LA28. And LA28 laid the foundation for the work they did with the Public Safety Cooperative well before the games were established as an NSSC earlier this year. But getting the right people to the table, having conversations about what do we need to do, setting benchmarks and objectives, because we cannot go full board right now. It is going to truly be a crawl, walk, run. We have to have some KPIs along the way about what are we trying to achieve, and then making sure we have those right people at the table at that subcommittee level, because that's going to translate into operations, and then that's going to translate into resource allocation.
Thank you, Ryan. So I'll pass this back to you, Voviette. So we talked about, basically how it's like the venues changing in and out. It's nothing like we've ever seen in this area. I've heard the term like 7 Super Bowls in one day, if you can wrap your head around what that looks like. So we haven't seen anything like this, but how can historical data and past events help inform our current planning and risk assessment strategies?
Yeah, like most everything, you have to do your research. You have to do your due diligence. One thing that I have done is I've read all the reports from past Olympics where, keeping in mind, the last time the U.S. hosted an Olympics was the Winter Olympics in 2002 in Salt Lake City. I happened to be there as a young FBI agent. As FBI LA, we sent a couple hundred agents downrange to Salt Lake to assist in the security plan there. And I happened to be one of those. But you look at that, 2002, obviously, prior to that, 1996 was the last time that the U.S. hosted a Summer Olympics. That was in Atlanta. There were some concerns and issues there. And you look before that was 84 Olympics here in Los Angeles, which in Olympic parlance is really looked at as a very successful Olympics. 84 is looked at as a very successful Olympics. Then you look at a lot of the Olympics that happened on foreign soil in our international world, and 2012. You study all of those prior Olympics, and what we have alluded to, you go to your predecessor's Olympics. I spent most of this year in Paris with my counterparts there. And so again, and one thing I think within law enforcement, if you do it right, you become a student of law enforcement. You become a student of all of current events, everything that is happening around you. And that's where I have become now a student of the Olympics, and trying to bring together a lot of that historical data, Lauretta, that you mentioned, and how does that influence what we do? And as you can imagine, and why I brought up prior Olympics, 2002 happened right on the heels of 9/11. And that was the first big worldwide event to happen post 9/11. And DHS hadn't even been formed there. And so we are, again, putting something together. And that's why it's great that Brian gave a lot of the history of what he just shared about how NSSCs are structured. I think that structure will be extremely helpful in our success on how we put it together, and the fact that they've done 70 plus NSSC events. This one will be unique in the sense that it's the first sporting NSSC event. All the prior NSSEs have not been sporting events. So this will be the first sporting event from an NSSE perspective. But again, the reality of it, just with the size, scale, and scope, we need federal government engagement. We need local, state, and federal government engagement in order to do this, in order to make this happen. But the historical data, again, it helps inform some of what we do, but then you have to really bring it into the current landscape and look at how we're going to put this forward. I just want to foot stomp one thing that Brian said, and it's so important, is partnership and collaboration and communication. Those are the fundamentals. That's the only way we're going to get this done. That is the only way we're going to get this done, because this is, to a certain extent, it's all hands on deck to make this happen. And how we utilize our resources will be critical. And then the roles and responsibilities. We all are going to have to figure out what is our lane in this process, and how do we utilize our skill sets, how do we utilize our assets appropriately. And that's going to be the sweet spot, to be very candid, if we can get that done properly.
Okay, so I'm going to pivot talking about securing the event again, because Voviette, you mentioned, and of course Brian, you know, all the heads of states, over 200 plus, probably more than that, will be here. So what are best practices for securing the safety of high-profile individuals, our VIPs and our VVIPs, and dignitaries during these major events?
Sure, great. Chief, that's a great question. So when we're thinking about, and I'm going to share this from a perspective, like a Secret Service perspective, but the concepts and the principles apply to any type of dignitary protection, realizing that we will have a lot of other non-governmental VIPs that show up, and also various levels of governmental VIPs. But first and foremost, when we're thinking about events, that we want to look at is the individual going to an event, is that the primary focus, or is an individual attending an event? So what I mean, for example, is like if the president was to come to USC to give a speech, the president's coming, people are going to come to see him because the president's giving a speech. If the president goes to like the press corps dinner, he's just attending an event. There is a different approach that we take. So if the president was coming here to attend, let's say, a USC football game, the way that we'd approach that would be different than if it's a rally for the president coming on campus. Now, the reason that's important is because what we always say is what makes protection and not bodyguarding are three key things. One is advanced planning. Two, it's intelligence, as Voviette mentioned, an intelligence-driven process for all security planning. And three is what we're looking at is how do we reduce risk in the environment by bringing in particular technical security countermeasures. We had this conversation earlier today. And protection is proactive. If you only count on people responding to events like, next to a protected person, that's bodyguarding. And what we have found is, unfortunately, bodyguarding historically does not work. So when we are bringing, let's say, protected persons into an event, one of the first things you want to understand, what you want to apply is the same principles that you would apply to any other type of protective advance or visit, you would want to apply to that individual as a team. So I'm going to share a perspective of an event coordinator perspective, as well as a protector perspective. So from the protector perspective is you want to know just the general information about the individual. What is their threat profile? What potential outcomes, unwanted outcomes could come from attending the event? What other details are going to be there? What is the security apparatus in place? Working with that event committee and security committee for that venue early on, and understanding how to work. So for example, if we were to go to, let's say, USC, we would work with Chief Hill early on to make sure that she understands, in addition to her responsibility of securing the stadium, the Coliseum, that we're going to also have a plan separate for how do we deal with our individual. That's that advanced planning. We don't want to do that on the fly. Having a process for trying to say, there's the administrative process and then there's emergency plan. So whenever you take somebody into an event, you're going to have to figure out what is the emergency plan, like in the event of, let's say, whether it's a man-made, a natural or technological, let's say, disruption of the event. How are you going to get your person out in conjunction with the plan that is in place? So that's the protective standpoint. For those who, I imagine that there's quite a few here that are familiar with the ICS system and NIMS. So one of the things that we talk about, the Secret Service doesn't normally work within ICS and NIMS because we're very myopic in our focus, because we're looking at one person. How do we get that person off the X? That's that protector mindset. It's important though, and this is where we're trying to be more of a learning agency about how do we fit in with the apparatus, because even as we are moving somebody out, so for example, let's say we're down in Orange County and we need to move the protectee, let's say, out of a residence and get them to a relocation point, you still are gonna have a job to do in your community. So working alongside with you, and most importantly, not getting in your way, that's a key job of a protector, is how do you facilitate what you need to get done without disrupting, but know how to fit best in that practice. Now, as an event coordinator, one of the key things is understanding who is there, what resources you can allocate to them, knowing that you have a higher level objective of securing the event, securing all stakeholders at the event, whether they're, in this case, let's say whether they're athletes, whether there's staff who are working in concessions, or whether they're spectators. But also realizing that in the back part of that, a few of your spectators, or in this case, many of our spectators, are gonna be these higher profile individuals. So having a separate plan in place for saying, as we are dealing with the general public, how do we also work and create a safety plan, an emergency action plan for those individuals? It's not easy, but with advanced planning, again, it can be done.
Thank you. And Joe, I'm gonna send this one to you. What emerging trends and technologies are shaping the future of security and event planning, and how can they be leveraged to enhance event management?
I think there's always a lot of new technology that's out there, right? And it's about understanding that technology. How does it intertwine with current technology? And looking at that piece. I think it's about a balance and a blend of combining those. We have to have multiple avenues and facets of how we're going to be able to, and I'm going to take communications, right? How we're going to communicate. There's emerging technology that helps us communicate quicker, better, faster, although sometimes that technology fails. So it's also having that backup. So I think it's understanding what the technology's capability is, how that's applicable, and then also having how that blends in with the backup communications and technologies. And that's one avenue, one aspect. I think that there's a lot of, and I'm going to tie into the next part, which is the AI, right? So there's a lot of aspects with AI that we're starting to see become more available to us of how we can utilize those tools, right? And so it's data mining, it's gleaning that information, it's helping with reporting avenues and aspects, but it's also looking at what are the challenges of AI, or what are things that the pitfalls that we need to keep in mind, and incorporating those aspects into what our response efforts are or what our planning efforts are, right? So if we're looking at and we're incorporating in artificial intelligence and looking at data and reports, is it coming from viable resources, or is it false information, right? I think those are the new things that we're looking at, and that's part of the emerging threats or emerging technologies, I would say. It's a combination of both, right? That as that we have more information come into us or available to us as an emergency technology, how are we looking at that information? And it just isn't accepting it as face value. It's really having that human interaction of looking at that information, identifying and gleaning it, but there are resources that we can use to help collect the information, and then there has to be that dissection piece, aspect and component.
Voviette, can you follow up a little bit? And so LA28, obviously it's a massive undertaking. We're just the security portion of the whole, the planning portion of planning committee. So can you talk about how technology is shaping how LA28 is using that in his AI, a part of how the bigger operation is working?
Yeah, we're figuring that out, to be very candid. And I appreciate you bringing up the fact that's the thing with LA28. Obviously, we're here talking about security, but there are a lot of different aspects of the LA28 structure that really is going to impact how these Olympics are done. And I'll tell you guys, some of these jobs I didn't even know existed, but we have, people that are designing, seating bowls, because even though we have an embarrassment of riches here in Los Angeles versus when you compare 84 to now, we're not building any new permanent structures. That's typically what happens during Olympic periods. People are building or organizing committees, they build new stadiums. We have an embarrassment of riches here in our backyard as far as all the stadiums that we have. And when you talk about technology, we will leverage some of the technology that they do. But when I say we're not building any structures, I'll give an example. We are going to host track and field in the Coliseum. What's one thing the Coliseum doesn't have right now?
A track.
A track. Okay, so we have to build a track in the Coliseum. And so as a result of that, we will have a lot of building projects, but as a result of that, the seating configuration that currently exists in the Coliseum, it will be impacted by the fact of the sport that we are utilizing it for the purpose of. So everything is going to look different. And I just want to impress upon, it's like the way you enter into stadiums right now will not be the way you enter into those stadiums, when we host the Olympics. From a security, from a transportation standpoint, the way you are going to get to stadiums will not be the manner in which you get to stadiums now. I'm gonna, share a little tidbit. I mean, transportation-wise, like I was saying, getting people into the stadium, getting them out, we're going to have a challenge doing that from a spectator pedestrian, standpoint, a human person standpoint. We can't get cars in and out at that battle rhythm. No spectator is going to be able to drive to the Coliseum to view a sport. We just can't do that. So we are going to change the dynamic of how you get around the city of Los Angeles and how you really do engage in the Olympic theater once it is built. But from a technology standpoint, again, I say that to say everything changes, and so we are going to have to be a little bit like Joe said, we're going to have to be creative, we're going to have to be innovative. But also, I'm one of these people, especially, from a security standpoint, you want technology to enhance it, but technology fails. Technology fails. And so we cannot have single point of failure. We have to build in redundancies on any processes that we put in place. Have to have redundancies in order to be successful. We have to be innovative, but sometimes a little bit, it's got to go back to basics. Sometimes a mag and bag check by an individual is a mag and bag check and utilizing x-rays, but we're going to have to incorporate technology into the equation. We have to be smart about the technology we utilize. The one thing I will say, the Olympics will not be a testing event. We are not going to test technology, We will utilize technology that is tried and true, that has been utilized, and where we feel it will be effective. But there will be layers to our security, layers to our transportation implementation, but that technology, yes, it should always enhance and advance what we're doing, but we will not rely solely on it. And again, there's certain sweet spots, and I keep saying that, and that's really where the planning and coordination phase of what we are embarking upon right now, and then we'll get to the testing and readiness phase of this process, and then we'll become operational. But the technology piece, A little bit is, and I say it gently, we're kind of building the plane as we fly it, to a certain extent. And we have to find a little comfort in that, but we have to get to a point also where it's very well defined how we are engaging and what we're employing, and we have to have a great deal of confidence. We have to be confident when we get into 28 on how we are conducting our operations. And that to me is really the goal. When it's all said and done, we have to feel very confident come July 28 of the plan we have in place, the technology we have in place, everything. And that to me will be a little bit of the success factor if we all have a great level of confidence moving forward.
Okay. Yes, absolutely.
Two things I just wanted to kind of throw out there, and one of them is to recognize the great work that FBI is doing on this, is that when we're looking at current but also emerging threats, UAS, specifically small UAS, is a major challenge. You have the great capability of delivering payload, and while we are working and have developed a lot of disruptive technology, it's still something that is continuing to explore. And the FBI has, through their through our colleague section in countering weapons of mass destruction, have a counter UAS working group. It's a great working group, both currently right now, but as we're looking forward and saying what are those threat vectors. The other one I just wanted to highlight is there's a term called disruptive cyber technology. And historically, when we've looked at, like, let's say cyber, we've always looked at it as a disruptive event from an Olympics. We talked about how do you prevent somebody from hacking into your systems and shutting your scoreboard off and disrupting the gold medal event, which is a major issue, and not to take away from it. But is it a life safety issue? So one of the trends that we're seeing in disruptive cyber technology now is that it's used to actually help shape the battle space. And so what I specifically mean is there's a concept of find, fix, finish, which means that you basically find the environment you're going to attack. You fix the environment to the best conditions you need, and then you attack the environment. What they're doing right now, in a both offensively and as well as being mindful, and we do have a mechanism to address this, both steady state as well as for special events, is that you can use remote devices to access networks. So if you figure out how everything works, like usually on a Wi-Fi network, and then you usually have amongst other types of devices, and you'll hear a lot of talk about like Internet of Things and different devices on networks, hitting security cameras, like the CCT cameras, unlocking doors, disabling other security measures, then allowing an attack force can come in. We have seen the weaponization of cyber, both, and this is not classified, both on the U.S. side, as well as we saw what Russia was doing in the Ukraine. Something to consider, just like Voviette said, is the world in 4 years is going to be different. In just the same way that, let's say, access control and AI is going to add to access management and control, AI will add to our capabilities to enhance our ability for detection. AI will enhance our ability for predictive analytics. But also, cyber is going to be something that becomes more important. So we do collectively, LA28 does this, we do this as part of the Executive Steering Committee. We look specifically at how cyber and how do we secure spaces, not just from disruption of inconveniences, but how something can lead to an actual kinetic effect and potentially lead to a life safety incident. But those are just two things that I want to highlight. I'm sure that there's going to be a lot more that come about, but those are two things that we are definitely tracking as current right now, but looking to grow in the future.
Oh, thank you.
If I could add to that as well, I think one of the things, collaboration is what we've talked about. So FEMA has a regional interagency steering committee, right? And so as we look at these topics that may not fall traditionally within FEMA, but this interagency steering committee can look at those aspects of cyber, how we pull in our, I like to say our siblings, CISA within the DHS family, how we can pull them in more, make sure that we're sharing that information of what those emerging threats are, the emerging technologies are, and how that intertwines and relates to us individually within the work that we do normally, and then how does that work with us and impact us collectively. And then also back to the whole sort of crawl, walk, run processes. What information do we need to get out in a training aspect and capacity, in exercises and practice before the Olympics, right? So utilizing world or global sports events that we have that are going to be in the LA area, utilizing that over the next several years, right? It's not just we have 4 years to plan and prepare and be ready for the Olympics, but there's World Cup, there's the Super Bowl. There's other aspects, NBA All-Stars. There's a lot of different things that we can utilize those resources. But I think, so I just want to say it's about taking all of this information, making sure that we're sharing it, and then looking at how do we need to package that together so that we can actually train and practice with it.
And that leads into the next question, because we talk about 4 years, and in 3 months we'll be saying 3 years. It's really close. But it's 30 days of the games. But like you said, planning, training, and leading up to it. And I like to use Voviette's term, the battle rhythm. So this next question, although it may seem far away, how do you see security and safety planning moving forward from this time now into 2024, and keeping in mind the exercises, our campuses being prepared and stadiums being prepared well before then? So some of the things that we need to think about. So moving forward, covering that needs to be accomplished to lead up to having a successful 28 Olympics and Paralympics.
One of the things that we're always talking about amongst ourselves is the interrelationship between event planning and security planning. And these are conversations that Voviette and I have had probably for almost a year.
Yeah.
Almost a year. And so the way that this works is that you cannot plan in a silo. Meaning that you can't plan an event and you can't plan security separately. It is a process that we work together. So the way that this works as we're moving forward is that we already have had, from a security standpoint, from a governmental standpoint, we already have established the NSSE framework. We've got the designation. We've already established the subcommittees are those as I mentioned, I believe that we have 7 this year. We're going to plan to add more additionally next year. As we move closer and we move from that crawl to walk to run, what I would anticipate is that what we will see is that as we get closer to about 2 years out, we will have more and more subcommittees. At 2 years out, all the subcommittees should be established, and then we would go into a full-on coordination center here within the city of Los Angeles to look at, as well as potential like hubs, just because it's going to be such a large geographic footprint, about how we're actually doing now real, like full-time planning. The key with that is that we cannot plan if we don't have an event. Security planning plans around events. It's integrated into it, but we can't have an event. So, for example, if USC Coliseum isn't a venue, then there's nothing for us to plan. So the reason why I say that we go back and forth and we have such a close partnership between the NSSC and LA28, specifically Voviette's team, is because we have to work together to understand what is the environment going to look like, what does it look like today, how is it going to shape for tomorrow, and ideally, like what would be the end? What does that end state look like? And we can start to layer that security apparatus into where we need that. And again, security meaning all-encompassing operational plans, security, incident response, consequence management. Without Voviette, we can't do our job. Without LA28, we can't do our job. We need to understand what is that environment that we're going to plan around. So we, in as simple as this sounds, and it's not a simple process, the subcommittees coming together now will drive the operational outcomes that we seek to achieve around the Olympics. As we start to identify venues, what we will start to do is, working in partnership with Voviette's team, we will identify specific venue coordinators. We've already started that process. The reason we have a lot of the folks in the audience today are already part of this ESC who understand, who know what I'm speaking about, is that it's coming together now in slow, steady fashion for saying, what do we need to do today? And as we gain more information, figuring out what's going to be within the scope of the NSSC. That's a conversation that we have all the time, right? And so what's going to fall with under the NSSC and what's not. As Voviette mentioned, like the one thing we did take away from Paris was the huge amount of private security. Private security is key. That's why having Voviette here is so important to us, because we have to plan together, because not everything will fall under the NSSC. So think about all those who attend an event, like even here, you have CSC, right? You have CSC, SoFi has CSC, private security, but you still have all the partners here, all the law enforcement partners. That's exactly what it's gonna look like, but just on a massive scale. But as we move forward, it's that slow, steady cadence of identifying subcommittees, identifying emerging needs. Like, we were even talking about possibly something that, because the Olympics is so unique, we've already established a housing subcommittee that other NSSCs don't have. We might have to talk about establishing maybe a private sector subcommittee to look at all the different technology, because we're looking at a lot of different security technologies across different venues. But that's the process of how we are going to move forward as a government through these subcommittees, moving into specific venue security planning, moving into Olympic Coordination Center, and then actually towards the end of those last final 2 years, actually starting to bring in all those eventual resources, and probably with maybe like 3 to 6 months out, actually starting to get the key people who are going to make this happen show up, whether it's federal government bringing in resources, DOD bringing resources, or through them, I would imagine, the massive amounts of mutual aid that we'll see for different departments and agencies coming in, either across the state or potentially from other states.
Yeah, sure. The reality of it is everything Brian just said is spot on, but the reality of it is all eyes are on us now. As soon as closing ceremonies ended, LA became it. And that's literally where we are. We are it. We are next in the chute. We are hosting the next Summer Games, and all eyes are on us. There you have it. That is the current state of the union. And from now, 2024, here we are, October of 2024, opening ceremonies is July 14th, 2028. So from now until that marker, we have to really put meat on the bones of everything Brian just alluded to. And I think he laid it out very well, because right now we are in the planning and coordination phase, and that's going to take a little time. That's going to take significant effort. And I'll be very candid, not the funnest part of the phase for me. I like the operational phase. I told my counterpart when I hit the ground for Paris for the Olympics, I got there a couple weeks early. I told him, I said, God, I'm a little jealous. You're in it now, it's as stressed as he was, but he was in it, about to execute all of the planning and coordination, testing and readiness phases that we're now about to embark upon. And a few of you I've talked to, and they're like, do we have enough time? Why don't we have more time? We are where we are. Here we are at it. And we have to make sense of everything. And as Joe kindly said, we have very large-scale events. No other city can say what the LA region is about to embark upon. No other city in the next 4 years is going to host a World Cup, is going to host a Super Bowl, is going to host an NBA All-Star game, is going to host the Olympics and the Paralympics. No other city can say that. You folks need to take advantage of that in whatever shape or form you can. That is my hint from a budget perspective, from a resource allocation perspective. You need to take advantage of that, because nobody else can say that. And we need to begin, if you will, the ramping up of our resources, our budgets, and obviously our planning process as we move forward. But we have a very finite period of time. One thing that we are about to embark upon, and Brian and I spent most of the day talking about it yesterday, is what LA28 calls our event operational planning process. And it will involve a lot of the agencies in this room, but we will go venue by venue for every games venue, 40 plus venues. We will go as a collective entity, LA28, and all of our federal, state, and local law enforcement partners, where we will do site surveys, site reviews for every venue. And that's going to take time. That's going to take probably a good part of all of next year. And that's the planning process, where we have a huge chore that we're up against, but we have to take one bite at the apple at a time. We literally have to take it one by one in order to develop this comprehensive plan. And every venue will be a little different. And so, but that is when we talk about planning and coordination, it is truly getting the right people on the right seats on the bus, and getting all of us working together on a single accord. And the biggest issue, and one thing we have not talked about that I will throw in from a major conceptual framework, is timing. We all have to be on the same timing as we move forward. We can't have agencies or entities going in a unilateral direction or going on their own schedule. That is why it's so important that we do have these planning structures like the NSSE structure. Brian mentioned the Public Safety Cooperative. That is something that LA28 and the City of Los Angeles, the State of California, that we have put together because everything will not fall within the scope of the NSSE. However, I want as much too as possible, Brian, and that will determine our partnership. No, I'm kidding, but we want as much as possible. But the beauty of a U.S. Olympics is the federal engagement, because having this NSSE designation, it really brings additional resources, it brings additional equipment, and it brings additional capacity and capability. And again, like I said, we need everyone's best foot forward attacking this problem set. But it has to be coordinated, it has to be planned, and we all have to be moving on the same accord from a timing perspective to make this work. So each year we have benchmarks that we have to accomplish. And your agencies will get more and more familiar with the benchmarks that we have to accomplish in order to stay on schedule from a timing perspective, to make sure that we're ready July 14th for opening ceremonies.
Yeah, thank you all very, very much. Loretta, thank you for
Thank you for having me.
keeping everything on track and for the questions that you gave. And to our audience, sincere thank you to all of you. Looking from here at all of you, any one of you could be up here on this panel as well. We've got so many different agencies here, so many different types of expertise. I hope we can stay in touch in some fashion as we move forward, because this is a great focus group, if you will, for various things that we might not otherwise have the benefit of. And just a couple of comments on takeaways from this. I just look at the partnership that we have in this region, probably unlike anywhere else in the country. The events that we discussed require us all to be one team as we come down to it, no matter what the event is. But we should be looking at that as the way we do business every day. And we all have different budgets, different bosses, different badges, patches, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, our mission is the same, is to protect the public, and having the privilege to do that in the way we do it. So networking is absolutely key. When you leave here, go home with a bunch of business cards if you can, because again, I mentioned the quality of the expertise that's here. The things that were mentioned, the challenges: logistical, personnel, tactical, intelligence, and cyber, and that just scratches the surface of the things that we're going to be dealing with as we move forward. And again, find out who the players are in your own organization, and put them in touch with their counterparts in other organizations so that we all benefit from that. Voviette, you talked about being a student of policing. The field that we're in is constantly changing, so that's a great mindset to have. Nobody in this field, anywhere in the country or the world, is the ultimate voice on policing or in doing what we do. Every one of us has a role in that, and every one of us is a voice that's an important one to be heard. So play that role and take it seriously. Paris, you mentioned the opening ceremonies, 45,000 law enforcement, 22,000 private security. And I look at how tight we are here in this region just on a day-to-day basis trying to do the main mission that we do. So this is going to be a very heavy lift over a long period of time. So as we lead up to that, plan on the issues that surround that: exhaustion, being able to get the right people there, IOD, sick, making sure that we optimize what we can, and looking out for our people. Because ultimately, if they don't feel supported, they're not going to be able to do the job that needs to be done the way it should be done. And then think as we move forward on succession planning. Who are we training within our organizations? Are they people who are going to be retired when 2028, 2026 comes? And if we're sending those people to valuable, expensive training, what are we doing? Why are we doing it that way? Look into the organization deeper and figure out, okay, who are going to be here and who are best suited to be able to pull the mission off once we get there. And that's something that may not be popular. Everybody wants to go based on serial numbers. Hey, it's my turn, or I can value this. We all know how that works. But we got to be more strategic in our approach to that to be able to be what we can be. You mentioned too the key things: partnership, collaboration, communications, like it is in everything that we do, but particularly here, and knowing our roles and responsibilities, knowing what our lane is, what we're responsible for, and not delegating to someone else that's something that we should be involved in. Joe, you mentioned AI and what that's going to look like, the data mining, identifying the false information that's going to come in. It could be a great tool. It will be a great weapon for someone else trying to exploit what we're doing. But 4 years out, looking at this, or as you said, 3 years and 3 months, technology will be very different than it is today. The threat streams will be very different than they are today. The political climate likely will be different than it is today. The only constant that we see is change, and we have to constantly be able to adapt, be flexible, and be able to respond to whatever comes our way. We do that best when we do it together, and so I want to just say a sincere thank you to all of you and all of you for being here and being part of this discussion. Thank you all very much.